How you doing, people? It's Mike back again. What have I got to say? Well, I got to apologize for you quite a bit. I've been recording a lot of these podcasts. I do them really late at night, last little while. I've got a bunch of material that I want to put out there for you to enjoy. Some material from my camping trip, which I haven't integrated into video yet. I had a last podcast that I had on here, but I was doing overnight, that hopefully it got saved, but I don't know if it did or not, because what happened was I was doing it, and I don't know if it created the file or not. We're going to have to check it out. So, in the meantime, just to let you know, we'll be checking at it to see if it was done. I had a little bit of amendment because I recorded it about a week ago, and for some reason I thought it was already Remembrance Day coming up because I looked at the thing and said 11. It turns out it was 11/3, not 11/11. Now it actually is past Remembrance Day, and anyone that celebrates Remembrance Day on the Hill or the Santa Path or any other location I hope you were able to enjoy these festivities of such a somber event as that. I remind to all of us that war is not exactly fun, and there is a lot that has been sacrificed by many of the people in our lives that we don't always know anymore as time goes on. Grandparents, great-grandparents, aunts, uncles, great-uncles, family members that have long gone to wars that have been passed long ago. But what about now? What about the wars we've had in our time? Some of us have been around for the Korean War, for example. There's still veterans from that. Most of the ones now are mostly Korean veterans. A lot of Korean veterans. Veterans of the wars in things like Afghanistan or Iraq, for example. Wars that are being fought right now, like Ukraine, a war that we are not currently participating in, but I have a funny feeling we eventually will be, depending on the situation. Hopefully Donald Trump will be able to bring some stability. Yes, I said Donald Trump. I don't personally like the man himself. Personally, I think he is very, very overbloated. He's very arrogant and very, very full of himself. And I've been finding that lately I've been seeing lots of different media from not always completely truthful about things either. But then again, what's the other side? Politics is a game of perception more than anything. Sometimes you may not always have the numbers, but you have to make people think that they're not watching you, that the numbers are there. Numbers are easy to manipulate. Images are easy to manipulate from both sides of the aisle. Not just the Republicans, the Democrats. The Democrats are definitely not immune to this. Just as like anything else, information is power. I mean, belief is more important than reality. It really is. Many times in life, most of the things we believe are based on what we're told. Or in some cases worse, not told. For the people out there that were moaning about the Kamala Harris losing the election, let's face it, Kamala lost the election a long time ago when she first in front of the campaign. She was a very unlikable candidate, provided an unlikable campaign, very plastic campaign, very, very repetitive campaign. Every stop was the same speech, every presentation was the same group of ideas and that, and duplicate. She relied on a lot of stars and star appeal, especially stars that they had to buy for the Democratic Party, especially near the end of the campaign. It's unfortunate that we think that these people, or at least they think that we think that these people mean so much to us that we will go and do whatever they say because they know best. Well, I got some bad news for you. They're just people like everyone else, except they're just very, very rich and famous people. That's the only difference between you and me, is they're rich and famous. They don't have to suffer a lot of the hardships that the average people don't have to suffer. The stars, as well as the politicians, as well from both sides, many of them don't have to, because the problem is, in order to become famous enough to become a politician, especially the president, you have to have either one thing. Not really one thing. You need to have a couple of things. You either A, have to be like Donald Trump, who has control of a lot of money in his businesses and that over time, or you have to be connected to people that do have money, or belong to a party or a group that has connections that have a lot of money. And unfortunately for that, those people that have the money, like the old rule says, the people that have the gold make the rules. Now, I don't know whether Democrats themselves had any really bad intentions on anything, like people come into politics of every stripe. I think most people come to anything like that, public service, specifically public service, with intentions of serving good, or at least doing good within the confines of their own personal belief system, or the belief system of the people that they congregate with. The problem is, it's not that simple. Politics, like life, is not that simple. People are people, and then people have different agendas and interests in that. Trying to govern a small group of people, much less govern the people of a country as large as the United States, is massively hard for any person to do. There's always going to be somebody that's not going to like you. There's always going to be some group of people that's not going to like you. They just won't. And everyone says, well, populism. Well, populism is what politics is. Just that you can't call it populism when you're on the side that's the losing side. You want to call them. It's easy to call the other side populists by the fact that their policies are supposed to be meant to be popular amongst the average ordinary Joe. But what were the Democrats doing? The Democrats were doing the same sort of thing. They were doing they were doing liberal social populism, attempting to appeal to the louder masses' need for it to be take care of the nanny state. And let's face it, both sides to a certain degree have a penchant to do that anyway, because it's in our nature to protect those in society most vulnerable. Why would we have things like Social Security? Social Security is a vestige, just like health care and education, of a nanny state. The state taking over the providing of services that are general good for society and to guarantee that everyone has an opportunity, regardless of their background, of receiving some form of basic health, basic education, roads, and all these other things. What they've done with them, as most governments have evolved over time, they've created levels. Like, first of all, obviously, most of these levels evolved naturally because, remember, these two nations didn't exist at one point in time, but the places that people came from did. And many of these places were already starting to form by governments. Were changing from the monarchical system to some sort of governance by the people, as the people uprose against the popular masses and said that we want to have more say in it. We don't want to be we're not just servants to you and such. So over time, this power has been given over to the people. And of course, the American Revolution was a manifestation in terms of North America's fascination with democracy, as it became, of that very concept. But the people that originally started the democracy, the ones that actually came up with ideas, were aristocrats themselves. But they just didn't want to share the wealth. They didn't understand why they had to share the wealth with a nation thousands of miles away across the ocean to them. And that's how American democracy was born. On the war by average, ordinary people that were convinced they would be better off being ruled by their own people here rather than people thousands and thousands of miles away across the ocean. So ultimately, like that, Canada's road to democracy was quite different. Where most of the British subjects that came to Canada, and the French, a lot of them too, obviously, to certain degrees, didn't have this sort of agreements, but they felt that they were needed to break away from their home country. They were very much loyal to their home country. This is the real problem with Canada, right? Because you've got a nation that was predominantly dominated by two types of loyalists in this part of North America. The French loyalists, still loyal to France to this very day, and the English loyalists that were loyal to England. And the War of 1812 really changed that. And that was the event that made Canada become the way it was. And the British, attempting to make some sort of sense out of it, because it was such a faraway place, they recognized at that point in time that this land, even though it was a territory, a part of the colonial English and French domination, was very important to them still, in some sense. Not super important, though. Because what happened was, after that war, many people don't know that the French were given the opportunity to take over the whole damn thing. What the French at that time realized, they were getting fed up with the whole process too, because the war was draining a lot of resources, I can imagine, of that territory. So because of that, what happened was the French were given a choice. Take Canada or get two islands, Saint-Cyr and Miquelon. Little islands off the coast of the St. Lawrence Sea near Quebec, to this very day allows the French to come into Canada through the St. Lawrence Seaway and fish and have a 5,000-mile zone of fishing around those islands. And it just happens that island land right in the St. Lawrence Seaway, which basically means they can fish anywhere in the corridor of that St. Lawrence Seaway around those two islands. And there's still senators and people that still live on French currency, but also have the two solitudes of being so connected to North America, to Canada, that a lot of them have been to Canada. A lot of them have families that live in Canada. A lot of them were dual citizenships of France and Canada, because many of them had relatives that have come from the island, the mainland. and eventually married these people there from mostly Quebec and some part of Atlantic Canada. And that's a kind of really strange thing to have this duality of a nation that's still hanging on, so a small part of history that's still present in North America, where the British eventually let go of it to a certain degree and became more or less what we have today, Canada, the sovereign-like nation that we have today. What's that have to do with all this? Well, it has a lot to do with this. It has a lot to do with what's going on in the world right now. Canada is a nation at a crossroads. We're a nation still growing up, but to a certain degree have matured quite a bit in the last 100 or so years. We're in a place that we're not very densely populated, yet we're having population problems in terms of housing. Well, think about that. Like, this is the biggest joke of anything. Canada, with as much land as it has, unfortunately not all of it's habitable because it's fairly close to the north, not like in the Americas, which has a lot of arable land south, except for some deserts. Deserts are kind of like the Arctic, but just different. The same concept, really. I mean, it just doesn't. They're not very hospitable for whatever reason. In this case, it's hot. Ours is cold. But nonetheless, people still live in both places, both in the deserts and in the high up where the cold is. But not very many, and it's a very, very hard life for either one. But here's the fact that most of the people in Canada are concentrated around large areas that are very, very habitable, and they're clustered. In the case of like Ontario and Quebec, for example, a lot of people. Ontario is a more prosperous province, for it's closer to the north, closer to the water, and it's closer to all the lakes. And that's, so of course, there's a lot of people mostly clustered around the lake area and bottom of Ontario. That's why Ontario tends to be the largest populated province. And then you got provinces like Alberta, not as populated as much, but there's still quite a few people there because they have built up quite the infrastructure there for the oil industry, the agricultural sector. And then you got places like Saskatchewan, a bit of agriculture, a bit of natural resources, being on the Canadian Shield. Saskatchewan, same thing, sort of the potash industry and that. We got Saskatchewan, Winnipeg. It's it's Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. So that's why the thing is, it's kind of an interesting thing. Saskatchewan's got potash, but then you got Alberta, who's got bitumen oil. And then you got Manitoba, which I don't know what they've got. I don't know exactly what the resource base. I'm sure they have something. I mean, a lot of that land's on the Canadian Shield. I'm sure there's definitely something going on. I've never investigated that particular. And then, of course, you have BC. And the only problem with BC, being next to the right on the edge of the mountains, they're mostly a coastal economy, and there's a lot of trees, and, of course, fishing, because, of course, being the same nature as Atlantic Canada, it's obviously diverse, and obviously being close to the ports of major Asian nations and the parts of Eastern Asia made it a very important hub and to imports of goods, and sometimes exports, too, and a lot of goods from Asia, and a lot of exports to Asia. So it's quite a unique dynamic, because there's a lot more exports coming out of Canada to Asia than there is from the partner United States, which is not that far away, which is also on the same coast, but we're closer. Geographically, because we're in the northern part of North America, we're geographically closer to China and all of Asia. So, with the exception of Seattle, we are pretty much the destination for a lot of the imports that are coming into North America. Largest part of North America. For materials, and the export of a lot of our raw materials, because we tend to have a lot of natural resources, more so than probably the Americas have, just by the nature of the fact there's so much of the land that's not arable for people to live, but it's a damn sound good place to bring natural resources out and do mining, as such. But then there's a problem. The fact is, we got two major problems with this, and they're not just a problem of just that part of Canada, but they're part of all of Canada, really. The fact that the people that we know as the Aboriginal native peoples of this particular North America, the ones that Europeans eventually called Indians for some stupid reason, because they thought, unbeknownst to them, that, hey, it wasn't no continent, of the massive, especially a massive continent first landed here. They thought it was just some sort of island bump. And if it kept going further and further and further, eventually once they realized that the Indians weren't from India, they didn't even look like Indians, that the name stuck. But that's why they're called Indians to this day. They're not. They're not Indians. They're native. When people they call themselves Native North Americans, or some people call them Innu, or whatever those groups are, there's designated names that they all have in their native languages, of course. And that's the thing. they had formed nations of their own long before North Americans came upon them and called them savages. The only reason they called them savages is because, from their point of view, they were savages. They didn't have property. They didn't have a traditional type of governance like Europe developed, a law system like Europe. They didn't live the same European culture. They didn't have technology. They didn't have a lot of things. No, they didn't have these things because they didn't need them. For the most part, they were perfectly happy to live the way they lived for thousands of years, or for how long they've been here. There was no need to change that. There was no necessity. There was no desire or impetus or incentive to change it. Then we come along and we changed everything. Starting with forcing them to share the land that they originally just claimed as part of nature. They had no problem selling land to us because they thought we were idiots. They thought we were idiots because they, from their point of view, from their cultural point of view, the land belongs to Mother Nature. It belongs to the earth. It belongs to the universe. They're just occupants. They're just tenants on this earth. So the concept of owning something was completely off to them. They had territories. They had areas that they had areas within the tribes between themselves that kind of like were ownership in some degree. They were boundaries of areas that they agreed between themselves, between the different tribes that they inhabited, and this was our area and this was yours. So it wasn't that they were beyond the concept of territories and breaking the space up into actual designated to what would be the terminology we call nations. The thing we call nations, I don't know what they call them, but the nations is probably the best word to explain it. But when the Europeans came and said, okay, we're going to do this and this and this, and we're going to give you all these things, they laughed at us, say, you don't own it. We can't sell. Why are you giving this? We don't own it either. Why do you want to give us all? So they laughed at these pieces of paper that called deeds and ownership until the Europeans started defending those deeds with guns and weapons and telling them that they're no longer welcome here. These lands belong to us. You gave them to us. You sold them to us. And there's many people that still exist today that are very upset about that concept of the fact that they were cheated from their point of view of their lands. Well, they weren't really cheated. They were taking advantage to a certain degree because the fact is the different culture, the different way of looking at life. And you know what? Maybe the fact that their way of looking at it probably makes more sense than the way we look at it. Because really, when you own a piece of land, you don't really own it anyway in the modern Western system anyway. You get taxed on it. If you don't pay your taxes, the state takes it back from you. So does anyone really own anything? Or does it really belong to the state? Does the state really own everything? And who is the state? Who is the state? In case of Canada, the state is the creating monarch of England. We still are hanging on to much of the vestige of the colonial nation that we were. We've never ever broken away from America on that and said, fuck you to that, basically. And mountains in America are owned by America. And, of course, the dispute between their native peoples are going on and on to this very day are the ones that want to go back to live the traditional way. They want to go traditional life, free from the constrictions of the reservations that North American Europeans imposed on them if they want, as a sort of saying, well, if you want to live your life, we'll stick you in this little corner here. You can be left alone. But, unfortunately, that doesn't happen either. It's a sad testament to how Europeans have treated a group of people. But then again, like I said, I found out recently that the people that were quote-unquote natives, turns out themselves, through archaeological finds, were not actually natives at all. What they were is the same as us. They came here and took the land from somebody else. They conquered it from them. And who knows, maybe they conquered it, maybe those people conquered it from somebody else. We don't know. We just don't know how long. Haven't gotten enough history to determine how long civilizations of whatever type existed here before the quote-unquote natives came, and before, of course, we came. At the end of the day, does it really matter who owns what? We're all going to die. And we die, we can't take the land with us. We can barely take the clothes on our back with us. We can't even take the bodies we were born into us. Those belong to the ground where they came from. Everything that we are, everything that we own, everything that we have, everything that had been will be no more someday. All will be gone. And eventually this earth itself and the whole universe we live in will also be gone. So, what does that have to do with anything? Well, what it has to do with is the wars we fight, whether it be the natives fighting for land in North America and fighting for recognition of the land in North America as being theirs or not ours. The wars we fight overseas, whether it be World War One, World War Two, Korean conflict, the current Ukraine conflict, the conflict in the Palestinian-Israel conflict, whatever conflict you want to talk about, those conflicts at the end of the day are meaningless because all of us are eventually going to die. We're going to find out what happens at the end if there is an end. We'll find out if there's a God or whatever exists, or what if there isn't a God. We'll find. Maybe we'll find if there is a God to find it about. Maybe we just die and not exist anymore. Maybe there is no such thing as anything after that. Maybe the only way that we live on, the only way we transcend, is through the children that we have, the offspring, the aunts, uncles, and cousins that we have, the people that carry on our name, our traditions, our stories, long after we're no longer here. And maybe that's how we actually exist in perpetuity until all this ends. Who knows? Maybe those, quote, aliens we kept talking about are maybe another civilization at one point in time, another part of the universe, another part of the galaxy, whatever, that went through the same cycle as us and eventually finally find a way to transcend the fate that all of us will face one day, thousands of years from now, possibly, where we're no longer here anymore. We transcend and move on to somewhere else, and we find another place that maybe maybe the gods that we think of are more or less not really gods. They're just other types of life that have decided and found a way to exist and transcend and become. And maybe all the things we've created and all that we think we're so intelligent are merely just reimagining things in some other form I can't hear. And we take credit from because we think we're so damn smart. Who knows? Anyway, like I said, I got a couple of videos on the pipe that I'm going to send out. I think I'm going to post this one tonight on the channel. Hopefully get it out there, and we'll come back with other ones. Anyway, for all those of us that went to the Remembrance Day ceremonies yesterday, I hope you understand a very solemn nature. In spite of some of the people might have been there, you might not like. The fact is, you're not there for them. You're there for the people that sacrificed their lives for Canada, the greater part of Canada, the history, the people of our past, the fathers, the sons, the brothers, the uncles, the great-uncles, the grandfathers, the great-grandfathers, who died in the worthless cause of all causes, which is war. But the fact was they were called upon to do it by people who thought that these wars needed to be fought and that these wars could be won. And then when they were won, they'd have peace. Maybe. But the fact is, when they fought the First World War and they thought this was the war to end all wars, who would have thought that maybe 20 or so years later they'd be doing a reset of the whole thing again, called World War II. We've been waiting for World War III for a while. Everyone's been talking, World War III is about to come. Let's just hope that smarter heads prevail and realize that there is no point to it. Endless series of wars. We only have this finite little rock to live on for now. We need to figure out a way of getting along on it. We need to find a way of respecting the fact that other people have different beliefs than us, and also respect that some of our beliefs may have to be curtailed to some degree because some of our beliefs are so wacky that they impede on other people's rights to have an existence. And that's just it. You've got places in the world where a lot of people come from that have these beliefs and they live with these beliefs every single day, and that's the law, and that's everyone else living like that. If you want to live that way, go back to the place you came from that allowed you to keep these values. If you've come to North America or you've come to Canada, I'm sorry, we do our best to accommodate. I take the word tolerate. Tolerate's a word that's used a lot in terms of expecting religious and ethnic differences. I hate the word tolerate. I don't tolerate anything that I don't want to tolerate. I accept. I try to incorporate. I try to respect as much as I can, as long as anyone beliefs or religious traditions or whatever philosophy of life does not impede on my ability to have a life or my ability to do things that I do and impede on my freedoms. And I have to expect that I don't want to impede as much on yours either. So there has to be some mutual respect and compromise. But when you come to this country, Canada, who is based on mostly European traditions, most of the people here, to the most part, have assimilated to those traditions. They've kept their religion to a certain degree. They've kept it as a private practice amongst themselves. Because the fact is, that is the respect that we give as a country. I don't tolerate you for that. I don't do tolerance. I accept the fact that I know, given the nature of this country being so diverse that it is, that we have to accept and accommodate to a certain degree other people's beliefs. But as far as the laws of this country go and the standards and values that this country have, any of your beliefs or any of your principles or anything that impede upon or infect or even impose change on the values that most of the rest of these people in this country have lived on since the beginning of this country's existence cannot be tolerated. That's what I don't tolerate. That's what we can't tolerate. Because if you want to, like I say, if you want those traditions, go back to the place you came from, where those traditions came from, where they're not only tolerated, they're accepted. You knew when you came here that these values are not accepted in this thing. They're not either tolerated or accepted. You need to believe your belief system is accepted. It's accommodated. But never ever confuse that for the laws that you have that may be based on this belief system that don't fit the narrative of this nation. We all have to get along. But the thing is, getting along is one thing. Putting up with things like protests for nations far away that you left for some reason. Think about it for a second. If you left the nation you came from, you can be supportive and sympathetic of it. Sure, I know people. There's a difference between sympathetic and a difference between protesting and expecting and disrupting the lives of other people that have nothing to do with it, that have done you no personal harm or done the nation you came from, that you obviously left no personal harm, but you feel you need to impede upon that's just the same. And impede upon the rights of other people here who also left those nations, who are also trying to get along. And in the end, what good does it serve anyway that fighting a war back in the nation to begin with? Because ultimately, what are you going to gain by it? A little piece of land that one day all of us are going to die and not be on, or maybe buried on if we bury ourselves on. But we're gone, we're dead. Why waste all that precious life fighting with other people over little tiny pieces of land when the end result is they'll just keep fighting back, and eventually what'll happen is either all you get eliminated or you finally realize you sit back down, this is not worth it, let's find a way of making it work so we can survive together and be respect to each other and mourn our dead for the ones that sacrifice themselves on the stupidity of us fighting over causes that are not worth fighting for. Anyway, that's enough for me today preaching about war and philosophy and that. I'm not talking about any specific group here because this type of thing applies to any group and any conflict that existed at the beginning of time. The people that are fighting the conflicts now, they know who they are. I don't have to point them out. I don't have to say their names. They know who they are. And they need to figure out their shit. Don't ask us to help you fix your shit. We can provide aid to you when you figured out what your shit is need to rebuild. We can do that. We've done that. Canada's done it many times. We can even help to enforce the peace during the early days of finding some sort of peace. We've done that too. Canada is very good at that. But fighting wars, Canada is not in the business of fighting wars. Canada shouldn't even be in the business of funding wars. Why should we facilitate the cause on any side of any conflict of the continued fighting against the cause and determining who's right when the fact is neither side is really right at all, because there is no right side. The fact is you either exist or you don't. And if you feel that you have to eliminate the other side because they've done you wrong and you can't just get on with it and forget about it and just move on with your life and recognize the fact that war is sad, it's tragic, people die, and then think, why would I want to kill this person when all it's going to do is precipitate them wanting to kill me or my friends and my family? At some point in time, it's got to stop. It can't go on forever because the only end it can get into is that everybody dies. And then who wins? Nobody. The only people that win a war like that is the people come along after the fact and clean up the mess and take the place over and then erase all existence of you both there in the first place. And that's usually what happens with those types of wars. Somebody else comes along eventually after you guys have fought your fucking battles, beat yourselves to senseless into the ground, and both die for the cause that you think is very, very important to die for, and somebody comes along, wipes you off the face of the earth of your existence, erases all your monuments on both sides, takes over the land you have, and puts a new civilization there, and without a thought about you ever existing. And just think how many times in history that's probably already happened. Look at how many civilizations have been built upon civilizations that couldn't learn a lesson that peace is the way to go, coexist is the way to go. War is futile. And anyone that builds weapons for war, or anyone that fights wars over land or anything like that, or any causes that are clearly not worth fighting or is definitely not learned that lesson. And I'm sorry for you. Maybe someday us humans will learn that lesson. I hope it's in my lifetime, though. I doubt it will be. I really do. It's a sad thing that I know that in my lifetime, peace and the sector of peace and the personal sector of coexistence and harmony and mutual respect and love and affection and working towards more positive things, like maybe us going out to space one day and exploring the universe, or maybe just spending more time exploring our planet, which is an infinitely more interesting and more productive thing to do, learning more about our home than finding ways to kill each other in the process to take over little pieces of land that none of us ever own. Enough to talk about that. Anyway, just thank Remembrance Day is a remembrance of what happens when war gets out of hand, when wars end, and the consequences of the people that had to fight these wars and die uselessly in the cause of usually ends up being the status quo. Or worse. Anyway, that's enough for me this week. That's I would like to say, if you got any ideas and comment suggestions, just send me an email at info@endtimemedia.ca or comment on the channel. This is going to be on YouTube and should also be on Rumble and possibly Locals too. I usually put it on all three services as well. Like, comment, subscribe, and like I said, if you got any comments and suggestions, send them to my email. That's info@endtimemedia.ca. Or you can check out the website, which is still a work in progress, I say, unfortunately, because I'm a one-man show, and I got most of it up, but the store is still not built yet. I have to work on the store because Christmas is coming up, and I'm going to miss the very important buy season of all the things I could sell you to make money to pay for this channel, as well as the shirts. If you want to interested in these shirts, or I can also make these, can also be made in form of glasses, mugs, hoodies, and other things like that. If you're anywhere interested having some memorabilia from the channel, just please let me know. info@endtimemedia.ca. If there's anything you're interested in, you might want to have as merchandise, I can get back to you with pricing on that and let you know what delivery time is available on that. You can pay on the website once the items are posted in the store by your either Visa, MasterCard, and I think it also takes a direct payment, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. I think it does. It do that like a Visa debit or whatever. I think that's how it works. Anyway, I'm Mike. This is my two Loonies for Tuesday, November 12th. And of course, now the video is probably going to be posted on the 13th. Of course, it's not Friday the 13th, thank goodness, because by the time I get it posted that, I'll be posting it first on YouTube and then transcribing it up to Rumble and, of course, Locals. I'll put a small clip of my face on Facebook so people can check me out there. Also, we got a channel called My Two Loonies on that there, or you can go to Endtime Media on Facebook, as well as other places I'm hoping to put on. Anyway, I'm Mike. This is My Two Loonies work for the date, and talk to you soon. Take care, folks. Bye for now.